You are now listening to EdYOUcate, the most fired up educational podcast there is. EdYOUcate is all about the quality education access to students and how we can provide research-based solutions to free the young minds of the world. On this podcast, we will be exploring different educational experiences, education's greatest of debates, and more. The hottest educational podcast out. EdYOUcate is brought to you from the Albany State University's very own Center for Educational Opportunity. Enjoy.
On this episode, we will be discussing Ed Choice, the history of education, and teacher diversity. We have our special guest, Curtis Valentine, here today. Curtis, would you like to just introduce yourself and explain just your background, education, and what you do and who you are?
Hello. My name is Curtis Valentine. I wear many hats in this education work. My primary role is as co-director of the Reinventing America Schools project at the Progressive Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. We're a national campaign to bring choice, accountability, and autonomy to public school systems around the country. I also serve on the Board of Education in Prince George's County, Maryland, where I live. I'm in my third term. I've been on the school board for 8 years, and my school district is the 20th largest in the country. I also serve as an adjunct professor at the University of Maryland College Park School of Public Policy, where I teach education policy. And lastly, I'm the founder of a national campaign we call Real Men Teach to recruit and retain male educators of color through re-imaging and reinvesting in the profession.
Okay, thank you for that. So I heard you mention Real Men Teach and teaching men of color. So could you give me a little bit more information on what your viewpoint is about the history of Blacks in education?
No, thank you very much. And this work and my efforts to understand, where we are today as a country, particularly as it relates to the educational achievement of Black and brown children, to me, had to start with the historical foundation. I, like you, attended historically Black college, go Morehouse. And, when you attend HBCU, that's where you get a foundation. It's cultural, it's spiritual, but it's also most importantly historical. And so I think to know where we are and where we're going, we have to most importantly know where we're come from. And so, there are books and there are studies that you can, in your own time, you can really understand, just particularly when our people landed here or brought here, how education was used as a weapon. And how it was kept from us because those who enslaved us knew it could be used against them. And so when I think about, everything that a slave owner could do to their slave, whether it be rape, maim, torture, there was one thing they could not do, and that is teach their enslaved how to read, educate them. Even a white person could go to jail for educating their slave. And why was that? There are many reasons, but the old adage that an educated person cannot be enslaved is incredibly true. And here's the more practical way to think about it. When you educate someone and you teach them how to read and how to learn on their own, you also give them a passport to a level of imagination that most of us wouldn't have if we couldn't read. So literally, you give someone a book and they read about distant lands and read about foreign places. They read about places that sort of go beyond their own sort of immediate circle. That will draw their attention and curiosity towards those things. And so those who were really trying to mentally enslave us, because for the most part, enslavement was more mental, even physical, because if you know, most of these plantations didn't even have fences. So the idea that you could keep someone mentally enslaved required them to not know that there was anything off the plantation. What does a waterfall look like? What is a waterfall? What is a mountain? What is a valley? What is the world outside of my plantation? And if we could understand that, then we would seek those places. We would be curious about it. We want to see them. And so right now, education is about curiosity. It's about imagination. It's about creativity. It's about a young student, named Jamila Hawkins, who says, I think I want to create something. But where does that come from? That comes from understanding that there are others who have already created before you. But if you never knew anyone before you created anything, why would you ever think you could too? And so we think about, enslavement, but then coming out when even before emancipation, Black people were creating schools in the South. I think back about a recent discovery I made about my great grandfather, who even in the early 1900s created a school. But even going back further to that, a relative of mine named John Chavis started a school in the early 1800s in North Carolina that educated both Black and white students. And you fast forward to, again, emancipation, when the so-called Freedmen's Bureau came to the South trying to educate, these newly emancipated African Americans, they found schools. They found people already setting up schools. They thought they were going to come and kind of create schools for us, and they were already there. And so that's the power of particularly African American self-determination education, even at a time when, whites who were sort of lower income farmhands who no longer had free labor were not even pushing education on their children. They were like, now that we don't have the enslaved to work for us for free, we're going to send our own white children into the field, and they're not going to be educated. And so you had a period of time during Reconstruction where you had, education being pushed, by Black parents even more than white parents. And over time, you think about everything that was put in place to separate us, to underfund us, to keep everything away from us in order to get a quality education, that it was powerful. Because I say, if those who oppose you want to keep it from you, that's the thing you want to get to, because understand that they understand its power. And you fast forward to, again, everything that was done by my ancestors to, again, start schools. For those of you who don't know, please Google Julius Rosenwald, Rosenwald. Julius Rosenwald was a Jewish philanthropist who connected with Booker T. Washington, those who don't know, the founder of Tuskegee University. And he was able to connect with him and work with African Americans at local communities throughout the South, from Texas all the way up to Maryland, to create nearly 5,000 schools. Those schools became pipelines into HBCUs like Albany State, like Morehouse. And in my instance, where my Rosenwald school, my great grandparents are co-founders of Rosenwald schools, that was in Southern Virginia. And our HBCU was a direct pipeline. The pipeline goes into St. Paul College, which unfortunately no longer are there. And so we have this HBCUs that are closing down, but the legacy of schools, so-called Rosenwald schools, still persists. But more importantly, the legacy of African Americans valuing education, leading the way, not waiting for others to provide it to us, but more so having to respond to them, trying to keep it from us. And so if anyone wonders, why is education important? Look at those who oppose us and understand that they understand education is a passport to imagination, creativity, and a way forward to be creators, which is what Jamila is, which is what I try to be, and what I think everyone can be if they just knew our past.
Wow. So I know we were referring back to the history of education, but can we just move forward to what education is now in America? Would you mind just going a little bit deeper into what school choice looks like in today's current time in America?
Well, school choice exists in America for a number of people, particularly those who have the income to get it, and then also for districts that provide it. But for far too many people in the country, they are limited to, and I will say stuck, because I think that definitely, that pejorative takes away the hope that even that neighborhood school can become what it needs to be for that child. And so I think the limiting of the options for people in this country is one that I don't think anyone can argue, even those who oppose so-called school choice. The question is, what is the role of government to provide it, whether it be through a voucher or through providing a charter school or providing resources to fund or options for homeschooling. And I think it gets down to a fundamental question around what we just talked about, this idea of the individual's power and freedom to control their own destiny. And that is one I think goes to the source of just what it means to be a human being, but also just the difference between all of us and understanding that it is a singular institution, going to be the best fit for all people. And so, if anyone on here is a parent or you have a sibling, you understand we're quite different. I have two older sisters. The three of us are quite different. I have two children, quite different. They attend the same school, but they learn very differently. They have different motivations. They have different passions. And so districts, the government, those who are looking to ensure that our country is competitive, even economically. And so even if you're looking at it, not so from a moral, it's the right thing to do. If you're looking at it from a purely economic, America is trying to compete with the world for resources, for human capital, that we should provide and make sure that Jamila is in an institution, in a place, given the freedom to make choices so that she can be her fullest self, so that she can best contribute to state of Georgia, America, and the world. And so the state of choice in this country is a debate that I think is long, it's long overdue, in that we've had this for so long. We need to come to terms with, one, do we believe that everyone has a right to freedom of be who they need to be? Two, does that freedom give our country a comparative advantage to the world? And three, what's the role of government to do so? I believe that, one, the government has every responsibility to ensure that everyone gets opportunity to be who they need to be. And, when that happens, it's a powerful thing. So more personal, my children attend something called a Montessori school. And so for those who don't understand Montessori, Maria Montessori, the woman who came to America, created this sort of model of education that's more sort of free thinking, creativity. And then you just fast forward, if you look at a study that was done in Silicon Valley with more tech founders, the majority of tech founders in America, black or white, attended Montessori schools. And so the idea that school model is sort of the forerunner to a lot of the apps and technology that a lot of us are using today. Are you telling me those founders are better off not having had a Montessori education, and you and I not having had the apps and the tools that we use today? Other places, we have students who have more of an interest in, vocation, use of their hands, carpentry, electrical, brick masonry, all the different things. Is that not important? Are you and I both right now sitting in places that were built by the hands of people, most likely who didn't have a college degree? But we sit down in chairs. I'll get out of my bed, walk downstairs. I have no sort of question that whether my stairs are going to hold me, whether the chair you're sitting in is going, you have faith that when I sit down, it's going to hold me. But that was probably done by somebody who didn't have a college degree. Similarly, we have people who are in the arts. You and I, when we get off this, we're going to turn on the radio and listen to music. The people who are on our radios, people on our television, the majority of them probably didn't go to college. They learned that sort of through a music teacher, a program where they were given an opportunity to bring their life to the world. And so is it better off to have, John Legend be a bus driver rather than a piano player? Is it better to have Beyonce be an engineer than a world-renowned creator? We have to give everybody an opportunity. And so what we try to do at the Reinventing America School Project is go to school districts, talk to school board members, superintendents, legislators, and say, hey, how to create systems that allow parents, teachers to create schools in the image of what the parents in the community want, but also what is going to allow them to bring who they are to the world.
Wow, thank you for that. I like how, in a nutshell, you were mentioning how students and kids they don't learn one size fits all. You even said with your children, they go to the same school, but they're not learning the same ways. And I know how important it is to have teachers that can meet the needs of every student, even if they don't learn the same way. And so could you just give an example or your viewpoint on how important it is to have teacher diversity in America and in the school systems?
Well, I think teaching is the most important job in America, in the world. And, at the Real Men Teach work that we do, we say that we need to redefine what it means to be a teacher. And it's not simply the person who's sort of standing in front of you, giving you a lecture. It is anyone who imparts a lesson that you take and you apply to your life. If you ask anyone, what's the most important lesson you've learned? I bet all the money in my pocket, it's not going to be a lesson they learned sitting at a desk in a classroom. It could be one on a bus, in a beauty salon, on the basketball court, in church, at the dinner table, at a family reunion. I say, you know what? One, we're all teachers, every single one of us. And if you ever wonder that, who taught you how to tie your shoes? Who taught you how to ride a bike? It wasn't your school teacher, most likely. And so we have to create a unit, an ecosystem around our children to say everyone in their life is a teacher. That being said, if that's the case, what should that world look like? Both in the classroom, but also outside of the classroom. It should be reflective of them and the world. And if you look at, where we look at now, only 2% of teachers in America are Black men. Right now, we are still struggling to get back to pre-Brown versus Board of Education teacher levels. When Brown Board of Education came out, which for many people was a landmark decision, it also integrated schools, but told Black educators that they couldn't teach in integrated schools because there was still this racism around Black teachers teaching white students. And so right now we have projects and Real Men Teach part of other programs in the country to say, how do we diversify teaching? Because the data shows that when Black children are exposed to Black educators, when Latino children are exposed to Latino educators and so on, they just perform better. But also they have a greater sense of hope and their future, which is incredibly important to, just effort and determination to get through hard problems and tough assignments and this idea that, why am I going to school? Why is this important? What is my future looking like? And so when you have an educator who went to Albany State and you're a student, you're just like, well, I'm not sure, where I see myself in the world. And you say, well, you know what? I'm a graduate of Albany State. I'm going to tell you how amazing and beautiful you are. Let me show you people who look like you, who are striving and creating and doing amazing things if for any reason you have been exposed to them. And so I think the power of diversity is one, the data is just clear. This is not sort of a warm and fuzzy campaign that we all sort of want to just be super woke about. The data is clear that when you diversify teaching, everyone wins. These are also white students. So I mentioned, I teach at the University of Maryland, College Park. For many of my Black students, I was the first Black male professor they've had, but similarly for my white students. And so it's not just like, let's do this for all our Black students. It's for the white students who have to understand that Professor Curtis Valentine has a different perspective on the world. And you need to know that, especially if you want to go into the world and call yourself an expert. If you want to call yourself someone who's knowledgeable about the world from different perspectives. And so when we think about the difficulty to recruit particularly diverse teachers, particularly men, there's so many obstacles, but also to retain, more importantly, because a lot of districts will recruit, particularly men, but it's hard to retain them for different reasons. Some of it financial, some of it just sort of just building community. And so Real Men Teach, we're building a national community and a national movement around what it means to be a male educator. And so those who wear our Real Men Teach apparel, when you go to our website, realmenteach.com, you will become part of a national family and brotherhood of male educators of color. Similarly, the proceeds from that go to scholarships to ensure that money is not an obstacle for men to stay in the classroom, because we know the power of male educators to really both provide a quality education, but more importantly, to see our Black and brown students for who they are, deal with discipline. If you want to get kind of down to the nitty gritty of issues around discipline, issues around motivation, around attendance, all of those things are positive when you have diverse teachers in front of our students.
Well, that's powerful. What are your thoughts of the future of education reform movement?
Well, to me, for too long, the movement did not look like you and I. And I often say, we are the only Black people, just to be quite frankly with you, are the only people who have ceded sort of control of our movement to people who weren't Black. And I said that would never happen in any other group. You would never find a conference dedicated to talking about the LGBTQ community and none of the panelists be from the community. You would never go to a conference and have someone talking about Latino students or Latino issues and no one be Latino. But you could go to an education conference and have conversations around Black and brown children and be the panel, and not a Black or brown person be on the panel. And people talking about, they're working with groups and they advocate and they're allies and all those different things, which are incredibly important. But we have to lead. And so, I'm a co-founder of a group called Innovation for Equity. And it was sort of the brainchild of someone who said, Curtis, I've been going to these conferences and the conversations around children who look like are not being led by us. And so I know brilliant Black people in every walk of life. We're going to bring us together because we need to control this conversation. Just like, we think about the civil rights movement and those who led that, there were people from different cultures aligned with Dr. King and others, but they were not out front. We have to be out front. More importantly, we need young people like yourself out front. Even though I feel young, but I'm an OG in this work. And I'm more than happy to pass the baton to someone like you. And if I can step back and say, hey, let me mentor, let me support. That's why I teach. I teach because I know I want to share what I've learned, because for the most case, advocacy is a young person's job. It's a young person's role. If you think about John Lewis was your age when he started out. Dr. King was 26 when he started the Montgomery bus boycott. You think about these college students. I spent time in Africa, working in South Africa as an educator. If you think about the Soweto uprising, you ever seen the movie Sarafina, the musical? Those were students in South Africa who said, I'm not going to be forced to learn this white Afrikaner language. They were in the streets. You think about Birmingham, those were students, college students, the sit-ins at North Carolina A&T and North Carolina Central. Those were all college students. And so I'm more than happy to step back and say, hey, get your shine, whatever you need from me, let me know. But the movement has to be more directed in a way that ensures that we challenge those and are very clear about, what we want to see. We can't allow people to sort of an escape route to say, I'll do a little bit of this now, a little bit later. We want what we want right now because other groups, that's how they demand and get things done. But also more importantly, lastly, I'll say is understanding how power works. We have to, really train ourselves up as a community, understand how decisions are made, how school board members function, the role of teachers unions, the role of advocacy groups, the role of state legislators, the role of folks who are writing legislation for people who create what we call model legislation. You just kind of give it to somebody and they just introduce it. Understanding elections, all these things have to be something that we study, because simply like screaming and tweeting and retweeting and posting pictures and, stuff like that, it's okay, but it's only a first step to really getting to change. So I'm excited. I'm glad to be on this podcast, seeing many people like yourself, particularly HBCU alums. You and others stand on the shoulders of other HBCU alums who really pushed forward during the civil rights movement, but are now reclaiming your position as leaders in this work. I'm excited to see it happen.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on our EdYOUcate podcast. Everything that you said was just phenomenal. And I love the work that you're doing with Real Men Teach. That's just amazing. So I just want to thank you for being on here.
You have just completed the most recent episode of the EdYOUcate podcast. Thank you for listening to the most fired up educational podcast out. Tune in every first Wednesday of each month at 5 p.m. during the 2021 through 2022 academic year.